It is now time to share the nominees of Teacher of the Year. But first, we'll take a look at the previous winners. Mrs. Crabtree, Miss Dozelek, Mrs. Gotro, Mrs. Fan, and Mrs. Miller. Without further ado, I bring to you the nominees of the 23-24 school year. The best PE teacher this side of the Mississippi. I'm talking none other than Coach Burts. Coach Burts came to this school and became a positive role model for all students. He is fun and funny to be around. He steps up and does announcements occasionally and gets along well with the staff. Coach Burts improves the culture and climate of Benton and doesn't go unnoticed. Coaches, the kids are always excited to see and work with Coach. He is willing to provide extra PE for incentives and entertain us all. Dynamic teacher, leader, wife, and friend. I'm talking none other than Mrs. Bowers. Mrs. Bowers always goes above and beyond for her students. She is one of the first people here every day and is always willing to support a fellow colleague. This is only her second year at Benton, and she is already stepping up to go to meetings and present PD. Mrs. Bowers is organized, passionate, and extremely caring. There is no one else I would rather have as a teaching partner or a friend. Mrs. Bowers goes above and beyond to support all grade level students. This year, she has demonstrated several leadership qualities. Thanks to you, Mrs. Bowers, literacy interventions are running smoothly. You rock. Graceful educator full of love. What kid wouldn't benefit from a morning greeting from her? I'm talking none other than Mrs. Curtis. Ms. Curtis has worked so hard to be where she is as a teacher. She has had a lot of curveballs thrown her way since her first day teaching and has handled them all with grace. She is someone that will not only do what is best for her students, but also her co-workers. She is reliable, accepting of all, and always willing to help you out. She loves her students, and you can see it every day with every decision she makes. She deserves to be recognized for all her hard work. Highly driven, highly motivated educator. Her passion radiates from the classroom into the halls. I'm talking none other than Mrs. Dorflinger. Mrs. Dorflinger is an outstanding educator. Her passion, enthusiasm, and content knowledge is nothing short of amazing. She spends countless hours of her own time making exit tickets, practice problems, poring over her student data. She works hard to plan engaging lessons and differentiate for her struggling students. She gets kids excited to learn math, and her data has been fantastic. She is positive and has a smile on her face despite some very big challenges in her life. Benton is so lucky to have Mrs. Dorflinger. Move aside, Mrs. Frizzle. There's a new teacher in town. I'm talking about Ms. Forrester. Ms. Forrester cares so much about her students. She continues to help each student achieve their goals every day. There's one specific student who she has worked so hard on to help that student achieve her goal, and it is so amazing to see how much progress she has made with that student. We are lucky to have Mrs. Forrester at our school. An explorative educator. Her teaching and learning is on fire. I'm talking Mrs. Hayes. Mrs. Hayes puts children first. She is very focused on making sure all of her students receive an exceptional education. She is committed to growing in her own education, recently completing her master's. Mrs. Hayes is attentive to the needs of all her students and fosters a love for learning that is foundational for each student's future academic success. She communicates well with families, and students leave her classroom feeling loved and cared for. Don't tell her it's her first year, because no one can tell. We're talking about Ms. Heller. Wow, where to start? Ms. Heller is such a huge contribution to Benton. She treats her students with such grace and kindness. She teaches her students like she has been teaching for years. She is truly an amazing teacher. We love having her here. The Reading Whisperer. There's not a child alive she can't teach. I'm I'm talking about Mrs. Lee. Mrs. Lee is an incredible person. She is devoted to her family and her students. She works so hard to support all students emotionally and academically. She is always looking for new ways to help students be successful. She is a wonderful team member. Benton is fortunate to have Mrs. Lee on our staff. Mrs. Lee always brings a positive energy to her teaching style. She makes all of her kids feel heard and seen. Her classroom is welcoming and positive. She teaches with an empathetic style that shows in her strong relationships with her students. Her classroom expectations and routine are strong, and her students are excited to learn. Mrs. Lee is very deserving of this award. Mrs. Lee radiates positivity and love that feels like sunshine to students and staff members. She pays close attention to the little joys her students experience, whether they be a funny comment, a new skill, or an aha moment a child has about seemingly ordinary things. Mrs. Lee then spreads that positivity by sharing these moments with others around the building. She presents a steady calm to students who may need a little extra love from time to time. Mrs. Lee's personable approach encourages students to be at school and feel excited to learn. There may not be a teaching strategy she has not mastered. If there is, you'd better hide it, or she'll own that one too. I'm talking about Mrs. McLean. Mrs. McLean is so passionate about what she does. She loves all the 5th grade students, and it shows. She will always do everything in her power to make sure our students are getting what they need to be successful. She is taking on the big task of being responsible for all of the 5th grade reading scores and helping 50 kids be able to better their reading skills. Mrs. McLean is always willing to collaborate, help when you need it, and give you great teaching advice. She is a positive role model for teachers with less experience. She has an amazing classroom management skills. She is able to pinpoint what each student needs and provide them with the correct support. Her data reflects how successful she is as a teacher. She is extremely dependable and amazing to work with. Come one, come all, to see the most fabulous music teacher of all. I'm talking about Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller always comes to school with such an amazing and bright attitude. She always knows just what to say to help lighten the mood and make people laugh in times of stress. She is also a wonderful advocate for our teachers and staff members and always has our best interest in mind and will fight for what is right. Not to mention, the kids all love coming to her music class. She creates such a welcoming atmosphere for students. There's never a time I walk by and don't see every student smiling and having so much fun in her class. You can just tell by how hard she works. She truly loves her job, and that is exactly the type of teacher our Benton kiddos need in their lives. Mrs. Miller does an incredible job making sure the students at Benton are exposed to many music opportunities. She keeps them engaged by giving them a variety of experiences, instruments, vocal work, music-making websites. There's something for all students to enjoy. Mrs. Miller also works hard organizing concerts and field trips for the kids. In addition to running her classroom, she supports so many students through interventions. Her passion for education and the arts is clear, and she is more than deserving of being the Teacher of the Year. Mrs. Miller goes above and beyond for her colleagues and her students. She ensures that students get to experience music in multiple ways and puts in the time and effort to get concerts up and running and field trips put in for multiple grade levels. She also attends meetings outside of work hours to be a voice for other teachers in the union and through the building leadership team. On top of this, she has a family and is continuing her education. She goes above and beyond, and she does it with such grace. Did someone say science? Well, Mrs. Riggs certainly did. There isn't an experiment she won't try. While Mrs. Riggs is new to our school, she has jumped right in to help share thoughts and bring new ideas to our building. She is a great member of the 5th grade team and brings fun and excitement to science and social studies. Ms. Riggs enjoys working with children and sees all children as individuals with talents and strengths. The kids love being in her room. I'm so glad Mrs. Riggs landed at Benton. Join her in the land of creativity and possibilities. Does there exist a more wondrous place to learn? We're talking about Mrs. Rose. Mrs. Rose brightens the halls at Benton. She is kind to everyone she comes in contact with, little people and grown-ups alike. She always offers a listening ear and would do anything to help those in need. She always looking for new ways to reach her students and even created an entire class service project after her class became interested in cleaning up the playground. She's active at Benton and helps with the PBIS committee, as well with student council. She's made stickers and shirts for Benton, and she's led PD. Mrs. Rose is an asset, and I'm so glad she's here. Mrs. Rose is so flexible and helpful and knowledgeable of her job. Mrs. Rose helped with extra school needs and assignments this year with enthusiasm and a get it done and do it right attitude. Her students love her, and she has a rapport with many staff and students here that is obvious and strong. She is an asset to our building. Mr. Wonka has finally met his match. Come with me, and you will be in a world of pure imagination. Mr. Taylor is quite the asset at Benton. He keeps the mood light and always makes people laugh. He helps anytime he is asked and spends lots of time making the hallways look beautiful. His positive attitude radiates, and I'm lucky to call him my friend. This school is a better place with him, and honestly, I don't know what I would do without him here. He simply cannot be replaced. Have you seen her room and lessons? What kid wouldn't want to learn and be a part of this magical place for learning? Mrs. White always goes above and beyond. Her lessons are engaging for her students and visually appealing. I feel like she must have an extra hour in the day. I don't know how she gets all of these amazing things done. Ms. White always goes above and beyond. She is amazing and at always creating something fun out of her lessons. I always love to hear of her next fun plan she has ready for her class. The students love her, and so does our Benton staff. Ms. White has created a class where her students learn and care about each other. She works so hard to make everyone feel welcome and loved in her class. She uses creative ways to get them engaged and learning while having fun. She is truly a fantastic human, and we are lucky to have her at Benton. And Bobcat staff, without further ado, drum roll please. And the winner is Mrs. White.